Hey folks, before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to share that QCon London returns April 7th to the 9th, 2025. Learn what's next from world-class leaders pushing the boundaries of modern software. You'll learn actionable insights from senior developers working on real-world projects across multiple domains. Learn more at qconlondon.com.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Michael Redlich. We're here to do the podcast for the 2024 InfoQ Java Trends Report. And I'm here with Ixchel Ruiz and Gunnar Morling, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So why don't you start, Ixchel?
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm super thankful and honored to be in such a great company. As you mentioned, my name is Ixchel. I'm from Mexico originally. I live in Switzerland. I work for Karakun, which is a consulting company. I do a lot of things. I use several hats. So, for example, I'm a conference speaker. I organize conference too, and Java user groups. So I'm very active in the community. I see my job as helping and sharing knowledge in the developer community, mostly in the Java community.
Awesome. Gunnar?
Hey there, I'm Gunnar. I'm originally from Germany. I am still in Germany, so I didn't move far. I am a software engineer. I work at a company called Decodable. And what we do there is we build a platform, a fully managed platform for stream processing based on Apache Flink, based on other real-time tools. So it allows you to do real-time ETL, stream processing, all those kinds of use cases. And we use Java for that. So, that's one of the many good things about it. Besides that, I'm also, I would say involved with, you could call it outreach, advocacy around different things. I mean, around Debezium, which is a project I led in my previous job at Red Hat. It's a tool for change data capture. So I talk a lot about this. I talk about stream processing with Flink, for instance. And I also like to talk about Java, right? One of the things I did, maybe some people have heard about it, is earlier this year, I ran a coding challenge, the 1 billion row challenge, and maybe we will have a few minutes to talk about it. That was one of the things where I tried to inspire and help to share knowledge within the Java community.
Awesome. Thank you. And both of you are Java champions, right? So that's awesome. And I, too, am a Java champion, which
is also awesome.
When it was, the way it was announced, the way I found out was quite interesting. Yeah, so I'm Michael Redlich. I've been writing for InfoQ since 2016. I'm currently the lead Java editor in that space, and then retired from ExxonMobil in 2023 in June. But I spend all my days, writing for InfoQ. I run a
Nice.
Java user group, the Garden State Java user group, and we meet in New Jersey. By the way, I'm a native New Jerseyan. Let's see, what else do? I do some developer advocacy for Payara on a contract basis and some technical writing. So let me preview the report that's going to probably come out by the end of this month. This is the 6th year that we are posting this. The report will have links to the previous 5 years. So from InfoQ editors, it's myself, Ben Evans, and Bazlur Rahman. And then from the outside, we have Holly Cummins, Grace Jansen, Emily Zhang, Ivar Grimstadt, and Andrea Perufo. So they've all provided input for this. So look for that at some point. This is a great way for people from the Java community to provide input on what's happening in the Java space. One of the things we asked the contributors is, what is new and exciting that we didn't expect over the past year? So, Ixchel, if you want to expand on that a little bit and what you think that you found new and exciting?
Well, this is not new because it's the 4 preview. And the 4 preview, let's step back. I'm talking about the next release, Java 24, that is going to be early next year. So that for me is the new. Like, I'm looking forward to that. And you will say that it's going to be very, very silly, or I hope it's not. And it's the 4 preview in how to invoke the less ceremonial way Java. So they have been trying to do the hello world in the most simplified expressful or meaningful way. And as I said, it's the 4 preview. So we have been working on it since, I think, Java 17, which was the first preview. And now Java 24 will have the 4th one. And for me, this is a reflect of the Java philosophy. I mean, Java, it's a language that I like, first of all, because of the ecosystem. Second of all, it's because this idea of we're here to stay. So we're trying to keep up with the past, and we're also trying to keep up with the future. And in these kind of situations, sometimes on some developers, some architects, some languages are crucified in the present. And I think Java has been solving a lot of issues without falling into this category. It's providing functionality and clarity and things that help developers in the today while not betraying its past. So when Java is deciding about the features and it's deciding about where to move, their view is not into what is new and what is exciting right now or what has happened the last year. Java has a very broad view because the past for Java and the ecosystem and the platform is 20 years. It's actually more, but let's say 20 years.
Yeah, 25.
It's actually coming up on 30 years next year.
Yes, yeah. I know. If you start thinking about some of the things that were added in Java 23 and some of the things that are going to be added, hopefully, in Java 24, are affecting things that are part of the core of Java. So how do you bring these new things into what effectively is a legacy system? It is a challenge. And the fact that we're not breaking things just because, it is amazing. So I'm excited about this because it reflects the Java philosophy from my point of view. There are other more functional ones that I can speak about, but I always want to highlight the whys and the hows that are behind programming language.
That's awesome. We could talk about JDK 24 in a bit, but Gunnar, what do you find new and exciting from last year? Or that you didn't expect?
So I think, and it ties into a little bit of what Ixchel was saying. So yes, Java has been around for a while, but I think it also is actually very successful in continuously reinventing it and renewing it, right? And keeping it up to date. And arguably it does it in an opportunistic way. So I would say Java is not necessarily at the forefront of language development, and they come up with language constructs or things which the world has never seen elsewhere before. So this doesn't happen that often, but what rather happens is we adopt things which are proven in other languages, right? And I think that's a very good approach, actually, because you see what flies well, what doesn't fly well, and Java takes those concepts which have been proven to work out well, of course, adjusts them to the Java spirit and Java idioms and so on. But I think it's very successful to take all this input and reinvent itself. And I think one of the things I'm the most excited about is how all this helps to overcome maybe restrictions and limitations which we had in the past. And one of the things in particular could be like garbage collection and GC pauses, right? Because this always used to be a problem. Yes, I just have long tail latencies with my application because at some point there's like a stop a world garbage collection pause, and suddenly there's like requests and they take 100 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds or whatever to come back to the user, and it doesn't make for a very good user experience, obviously. And now, well, with things like ZGC, suddenly we have, and I shouldn't say suddenly because this has been like an ongoing effort for many years, but now we're actually in a state where we have sub-millisecond pause times. And I don't know, I feel it's still kind of incredible that the language and of course also the JVM, well, mostly the JVM, not that much language, but the runtime has come so far that we have this sort of amazing experience. Similar thing with the upcoming compact object headers, which will substantially reduce the memory consumption. So I think all those things, and there's many other things, enable Java to, well, first of all, stay relevant, but then also become relevant, maybe in areas where Java was not considered maybe the first choice back in the day.
You touched on a couple of things I'd like to expand on a little bit. Yeah. So the one thing I put for the report, which you'll see, is it wasn't necessarily exciting, but it was unexpected. The string templates API that's
which we don't have anymore for now.
Right, for now. And so my good friend Barry Bird, who you guys may know, he reached out to me one day. He goes, "What happened with string templates?" I'm like, "I don't know." And I follow this all the time, right? I mainly follow the JDK dev mailing list. I look at some of the other project ones, but I missed it. And it was back in June that there were some unintended consequences, and Nikolai Parlog had a video on that. So I know a lot of developers were really looking forward to this new feature.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was going to be a second or third preview. But to me, that was something like, oh, what the heck happened?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes, that's true. But I also think it actually goes to show the maturity of the process and the team behind it, right? Because I know maybe in that situation would be the easier way to just power through and try to wrap it up and, finish it. But instead, I think you've got to be brave and you have to have some courage to say, no, actually, we found this doesn't work well. Let's pull the plug for now and let's go back to the drawing board and re-envision it. I don't know. I think that's really great to see. Also, if it means we will get it maybe a year later. But on the other hand, we have been waiting for 30 years. So I guess it's fine.
Exactly.
But you're reading something really interesting for me. For me is how many reviews the Jabs got. For example, the Vector API, it's also, I think, in the 7, 8.
Yeah, 9th incubator right now in 24.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, we have several releases that show us something. Sometimes we backtrack a little bit. Sometimes we go forward faster. And this is something that makes me feel good about the Java releases, because it provides you with this energy to try to move faster, because the numbers start to pile up and you're like, oh my goodness, a lot of the version is behind. Maybe I should push for going up into the Java that I'm executing and I'm using. But on the other side, it provides us with the opportunity to try the things, even though we know that maybe they are not going to stay like that. And that's a good thing, because the teams get different feedback from different teams and we can tweak and change.
Yeah, something you touched on, Gunnar, about the different features and having the courage to step back, from a feature, right? So there was evidence of that with JEP 404, the General Shenandoah, that was originally supposed to be part of JDK 21. Mm-hmm. But what I read was that the folks who were working on that felt as if it wasn't 100%, something to that effect. So this is one of the few times that, once the feature set is frozen, that it actually got removed from JDK 21. And then you mentioned the 9th incubator Vector API.
Right.
And I remember it was kind of interesting. It went through 8, incubation through 8th incubation. And then when the new JEP was created, it just said incubator. I'm like, wait a minute. How did that happen? So they changed it. I may have reached out to Sharat on that one. What's going on? So then they changed it to 9th incubation. But then the reason they're doing that is they're waiting for some of the features from Project Valhalla to be completed before they move forward with Vector API, which is part of Project Panama.
Exactly, yeah. So coming back to the generation Shenandoah got pushed out by a couple of releases, as you mentioned. I think this actually also demonstrates the willingness to do that. It demonstrates, I would say, the advantages of the very frequent and strict release cadence. Because back in the day, maybe if you had a feature which you wanted to be, I don't know, in Java 5, let's say, and then for whatever reason, it would be at risk for getting into Java 5, you wouldn't know how many years it would take until Java 6 would come out, right? Whereas now, if you don't get it into Java 21, Well, okay. I mean, it's not great. I guess you may be disappointed for a day or two, but then, okay, Java 22, Java 23, they will come out in like 6 months, 12 months later. So it's not the end of the world if you are just moving out to the next release, right? And I think this is one of the advantages of this release model. The disadvantages, actually, I'm curious about you guys. I'm starting to get confused. So what's the current Java version? I mean, back in the day, yes, of course, it's Java 8, it's Java 7, you would know it, right? You could be woken up in the middle of the night and you would know, yes, we are on Java 8 right now. But where about now? Are we on 23 or what is it? Is it 24 already? Actually, I have to think about it.
So, it's definitely 23 that came out in September.
Right.
And they're working on all the features for 24, which will come out in March.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm aware of it, but you got to actually think about it actively. I have to do anyways.
Yeah, compact object headers. Ben Evans wrote a great news piece,
right,
in that recently. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that. I that's part of Project Lilliput, I think.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a pity we haven't been here. He would be in a much better position to talk about it. But yes, so the idea is, well, every object which lives on the Java heap, it has an object header, right? Which defines, which is the class, obviously, which the object is about or has. But then also the header contains information about locking, about garbage collection, and so on. Now, every object has that header. So if we are able to shave off some bytes from that, it's obviously going to be a huge improvement in terms of the overall size which we need for the heap, right? And this is in a nutshell what this is about. And again, so Ben or maybe Roman, who is the main person working on that, they would be in a better position to talk about how this actually works and what the magic is behind being able to shrink that header. But it's merged now to 24, and it's going to be released as an experimental feature in 24. As you said, it's going to be out in March. And actually, I really just wait for the next preview build of 24 because I really want to give it a try. I played with the Lilliput preview build like a year ago or so. It definitely made some nice improvements. But I really want to try it again, run, I don't know, like a Quarkus application, Spring Boot application, do some measurements to see, what is the improvement in terms of memory consumption? And then also it actually could go to, reduce GC overhead because it's just like less space which needs to be collected and so on. There could be like locality effects in terms of CPU caches and so on. So I'm super excited, and they are not even stopping there. So there's already work going on to even further reduce the size of object headers. I think that's why I'm so excited about this, because it just goes to show, yes, we can use Java also maybe for things where if you felt it uses too much memory for a given use case. So I think those kinds of optimizations are like invaluable, and it's great to see this in Java at this point in time.
Oh, absolutely. Ixchel, did you want to say a few words about that, or did you?
Well, no, for me, it's a general remark in reminding, probably the listeners know perfectly well that many of the features of the improvements in Java can happen in several ways, but the more interesting ones are features like new syntax that you can use, or the ones that are not so visible for the developers. They will gain something without doing anything.
Right. Just upgrading. Yes,
it's going to the gains that they will see in terms of performance and in terms of memory footprint. It's going to be transparent. So magic will happen without them doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, the way I like to think about this from a high-level view, there can be improvements like in Java, the language, as you say, right? Language constructs, like the method stuff which you mentioned and so on. There can be API improvements like the vector API, and there can be improvements to the runtime. And personally, I'm actually the most excited about runtime improvements. So like this stuff, a garbage collection, all those things, better observability, better JFR support. So that's what always excites me the most. Next, I'm excited about APIs. So like Vector API, I think it just enables us to do more things which we couldn't really do in Java before. And I'm actually the least excited about language improvements. So, I mean, yeah, I know it's nice, but usually I don't really care that much. But of course, I still realize it's interesting to people, and I guess other people would feel different about it.
Yeah, it's a great topic, I think, and I think Project Lilliput was created last year or early this year. I forget which, but
I think it goes back longer than that, actually.
But it doesn't. But Ben's news item on that just came out this past Wednesday, and he discusses where we are and, what the concept is. And he had a diagram with, how the bits are allocated with the compact. So, yeah, folks listening out there, definitely check that out. And we'll look forward to seeing more about that as we go. So another thing I wish, Ben Evans talked about JSpecify, about nullability in Java. And this new initiative, I think that's a combination of a few companies that came up with these annotations for nullability in Java. I think this is awesome.
No, definitely. I mean, it will hopefully reduce or maybe eliminate null pointer exceptions. I think it's definitely a good improvement. I just hope, there's this XKCD comment, right, where you have 14 standards, and now let's do one standard to rule them all, and you end up with the 15th standard, right? Because they have initiatives like that before, nullability APIs before. But yes, fingers crossed, this one is going to be the one to rule them all. It's not just yet another one besides 14 other ones.
That's right. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to really wrap my mind around that whole concept just yet. I just know some of the basics of that. Right. So hopefully I get a chance to experiment with that a bit. Yeah.
Yes. And I think this is really where it just goes to show Java has a certain age, right? Because adding this after the fact, it's really hard, and maybe it feels like it bolted on. Whereas I guess now if you were to start with Java today or with any language today, this always will be part of the type system, right? And if you do a strongly and statically typed language anyways. So you would just by definition, you wouldn't have nullability concerns like that. But yeah, I think it's going to be an improvement to Java.
Oh, absolutely.
We're still trying to attract new developers. So yes, for the people that have been working on it and knew the pain points of Java, sometimes these new simplifications, for example, for the pattern types and primitives and things like that, feels like, we even look at them with curiosity and a little bit of a skepticism, because we have been living with them without them for so long. So suddenly they appear and we're like, oh, I didn't notice that I was suffering from this. It's the same thing with nullability. But the whole point is, for us, it may feel a little bit strange, but the hope is that the new developers that are joining us in the Java world, they are adopting them without that sense of this is alien.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, actually. Yes, we tend to stuck in our bubble, and we take so many things. Of course, it's like that. But actually, if you talk to a new person, to a person just setting out with their career in the space, and you tell them, just go to Maven Central and download your dependencies from there, and then you have everything on your class. But what? What are you even talking about, right? What do you mean, Maven Central? What does all that mean? So I 100% agree. There's so many things which can and should be improved around that, for sure.
There's so many things going on in the Java space. I personally think it's a great time to be in the Java community.
Totally.
Not only for the awesome people, but the language itself. And, and then you had Java EE being donated to the Eclipse Foundation. Now you have Jakarta EE, it's open source, all these 8 new APIs. And Ixchel, you mentioned about getting students or new developers involved, and, the implicit main.
495 simple source files and instance main.
Simplifying the...
Yes, which has been renamed about 4 times too. So this is a great thing too. This is something that Brian Getz, I think, initiated, because whenever I mention it, I always put a link to his white paper on that. And this is great because Oracle has the Java in Education initiative. And the Garden State Java user group, for myself personally, we are involved in that. We have our meetings at a university. We have a lot of students at our meetings. And some of the folks in our leadership team have gone out to high schools and given presentations there. And there's other jugs that are involved too, and other folks. So I think this is a great thing for getting young developers involved, because, Python seems to be the new shiny object, right? Java's been around almost 30 years now, so why would you want to get involved in Java? And some of the things we've done too is have lightning talks by the students. at a university where we have our meetings. And we've done it twice now. We have 3 students, they have 15, 20 minutes each. And then we have a main presentation after that. So I think this is hopefully, with our part, along with everyone else, hopefully we'll get some more Java folks, young developers into the Java system.
And I mean, I think an important angle on that also is, again, like this API and library ecosystem around the language, right? Because Python, I would say arguably one of the reason why it's so popular these days is because it has such a strong ecosystem of libraries in the IML space, data science space. So people in those domains, well, Python is the natural choice because it has all those great libraries for that. And I mean, Java, we have things like LangChain for J, and there's other things around it, but I feel that, there is space for improvement. So that's why I also think it's so important to, also make sure we don't fall behind when it comes to those things, right? Because in the end of the day, people won't use a language because they like it or not like it. They will use it because they have a job to do. And, well, they will use the language which lets them do that job, and the ecosystem which lets them do the job as good as possible. Ixchel, you seem to have something to disagree with that.
No, I totally agree with you. And this is the part that I would like to tell people. Yes, Python is really popular right now because the models, and it was adopted by the scientific community fairly easy because it was so, again, repeating myself, so easy to jump into it. It didn't have a lot of the ceremony that Java requires. Having said that, Python is not going to give you the functionality that you require in an enterprise application. Python is not going to support thousands of millions of data points or requests. It is not, because it was not thought in that regard. And this is what I keep telling people, like, you will have to train, you may need to train your models in Python. You may need, because that's where you have all this functionality. But once the models are trained and you have to provide the services to your users, you will probably have to, or you will choose a programming language like Java, because it's the one that is going to give you the performance, is going to get the one that is going to give you the reliability and the stability for building applications that are there to last. Yes, Python seems more popular when you are training, when you are trying new things, but in the evening, you probably will return to
So it's interesting. Just a quick story. So I worked in a research facility with Exxon, and a lot of PhDs, and everything was all fuel or oil research, the whole thing. And a lot of the PhD folks, the young ones, they came in having learned Python, and the IT folks, there was hardly any support for Java at our facility here in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. It was in Texas. Okay, so that's So there was support for Python. And then the company offered a 6-day Python course back in 2018, which I took. You had mentioned before, Gunnar, about scientific data or libraries and the data frames and all that. And I was like really impressed with that. So I can see why, the younger folks would do it. But then, Ixchel, what you said as far as building an enterprise application with Python may not be so easy. Almost impossible either way.
Yeah. By the way, I don't mean to make it like like Python is bad or whatever. I mean, they all have their different pros and cons, right? I mean, we are like one big tent for everybody.
No, at this time in our lives, we cannot be monologue, or like we cannot only use one language. We're in a time that you must be polyglot, but that's also give you the possibilities to pick and choose which one for what time and what are the limitations and the boundaries that you have to keep into consideration. And I have, not in my case, I'm not the one working in that particular organization, but I see it in the same way. I have a friend and he is a Java developer working a lot with Python nowadays because he is in the IT department of the weather organization here in Switzerland. So again, it's the same experience. A lot of the PhDs are writing their models, part of their thesis, and they bring these very interesting models into the organization to predict the weather better. But suddenly in the last months, it's their job to put it into production.
Oh, yeah.
And then is when he has to come in and in a way teach them all about software development, best practices, and how do we put this into production. And it's this really interesting clash of the worlds. That's why I said, like,
Right.
there is a clear boundary in terms of how do you put this into daily life.
Yeah. And actually, that touches a little bit on one project I'm also very excited about, which is like GraalVM in general, right? And I mean, there's so many angles around it, native binaries, ahead of time compilation, but also there is this very strong polyglot angle around it, right? And actually, there is GraalPy, I think that's what they call it. So the ability to run Python applications, including native binaries, because I mean, let's be honest, all the or most of the exciting Python libraries, they are actually like, fronts for C libraries and C native code. When this is actually able to be integrated into a Java application using a GraalVM, I think this could be super interesting. Also for this stream processing space I'm working on. So like there is for Flink, the framework which we use, there is PyFlink. So this allows you to, integrate Python into Flink jobs. And right now, this actually requires like an inter-process communication because, well, Flink runs on the Java virtual machine. And then if you have like your Python user-defined functions, they would run on the Python VM. Now, if you can actually integrate all this onto the JVM using GraalVM, I don't know, this would be really cool, I think.
Yeah, and just with the recent release of GraalVM for JDK 23, GraalPy and GraalWasm, WebAssembly, were elevated to, for lack of a better word, first-class citizens now. I think they came out, they graduated out of their experimental phase and now,
Nice.
More for production use. Yeah, so
that's amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on that.
Yeah, I one of the things I wanted to do before I left Exxon was to provide a 1-hour talk on GraalPy.
Okay.
When it was in its infancy, but yeah,
right.
But I never had a chance to do that.
Okay. So now you can get back as a very, very well compensated consultant and do the talk for them.
Exactly. So I wanted to touch on, the 1 billion row challenge that you initiated back in January, and I thought that was, I write about it in the Trends Report.
Oh wow! Okay.
And you presented it at InfoQ Dev Munich.
Right.
And then Karsten Sils, who's one of the editors in Java Space, wrote a news item on that. So,
right.
But yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun. And they had 164 entries. So,
right. Yes.
So tell us more about that.
Right. So how much time do we have?
We can.
Do we have 2 hours left? No, I will try to keep it brief. Yeah. So yes, what was it? It was I mean, it's pretty much in the name. The task was to process a file with 1 billion rows as quickly as possible. And the file, it was like random measurements of temperature values, keyed by weather station. So you would have, I don't know, like New Jersey, 20 degrees Celsius, whatever that's in Fahrenheit. I don't know. Hamburg, 15 degrees. Basel, like minus 10 degrees. I don't know. And you would have like 1 billion rows of those measurements. And you needed to calculate the min, the max, and the average temperature value per station. So that was the task, and I created this as a challenge for the Java community. I published it on January 1st, and then it ran for the entire month of January. So people had like 1 month to work on it. And yes, it kind of went viral, I guess. So people like really took it and went with it and put lots of effort into it, into optimizing that. And it was like a huge amount of work, which I created for myself because I didn't really think many people would participate. So I didn't prepare any automation for that. So whenever somebody sent me their pull request, hey, this is like my new and improved implementation, I actually had to go to my machine, which I had rented in the cloud, run it and like run it 5 times because I wanted to like eliminate outliers, take the outcome of the program, put it into the leaderboard. And so it was, pretty much my job during January. So big shout out to my employer to let me do that because it really came a bit of a surprise for everybody of us. But yeah, so I mean, maybe why did I do this challenge? I should say that. well, it comes a little bit back to what we spoke about before. There's so many new APIs and new features and new improvements in Java, right? And I mean, I don't know about you, but I actually have a hard time keeping up with all the new things because like every 6 months we have like this huge laundry list of new stuff. And so I felt this would be actually a nice vehicle to, well, put some of those things at work and see what they can do. So things like garbage collection. Turns out we can disable garbage collection because we can write this program in a way we just don't need garbage collection because we don't allocate like at runtime really after the startup phase. So, that was an interesting thing to learn. There is this vector API, which we spoke about, so like this sort of SIMD instructions, single instruction, multiple data, this sort of problem 100% benefits from that. And back before the vector API, you just really couldn't use those CPU instructions, whereas now actually you can benefit from them. So again, just a nice way to learn about this API and put it into production. Native memory, quite a few other APIs which people tried out, different distributions, of course, GraalVM native binaries, because I mean, when I started this, my first implementation, and it was implemented in a, I guess, naive way. I just wanted to show people this is the program and this is what it, is supposed to do. So this ran in 5 minutes, give or take. And people on my evaluation machine, which had 32 cores, 64 threads with hyperthreading, it would process this file with 1 billion rows with a size of 13 gigabytes. It would process this file in 300 milliseconds. So I know this was like really incredible. And of course, if you get down to such a short amount of time, 300 milliseconds, well, then the JVM startup is in a significant time of that, right? So if you are able to bootstrap your application like in 4 milliseconds rather than 100 milliseconds, this is significant, right? If you are at that range of values. And this is why like most people actually use the GraalVM native binaries. Other people use GraalVM as a JIT compiler because you can also use GraalVM as a JIT compiler, on the JVM. And in this case, the workload benefited from that. So people did it. So tons of learnings. And this was what I wanted to get out of this, right? So I wanted to learn something new and see what's doable. But I also wanted for others to learn something new and inspire each others and do this in a collective way, which is why this was actually set up in a way that people could collaborate and, take inspiration from each other and see, oh, I see like, the person over there, they do this amazing trick. So let me also employ it. And of course, you shouldn't take like Ixchel's implementation and just say, hey, that's mine, right? That makes sense. But if I see you do something cool and I can like add this to my implementation, this was totally fine. So people could learn together. So I mean, there's so many things more to say about it, but this was, I would say, in 5 minutes or whatever, the gist of it. And yes, there is the talk which I did at the InfoQ Dev Summit, and there's the recording, so people can learn more by going to the talk and watch it.
Awesome.
And just to mention, and you should prod Gunnar later on, it was not only made in Java, there were other programming languages with very, very interesting solutions too. There were sometimes very creative usage of the languages. Sometimes they were very extreme ways of forcing the programming languages. And that also provides us with some ideas of you can do marvelous things with programming languages, and you can force it sometimes even beyond their normal use. And one of the things that I loved about the Java solutions is that it remained like, yes, of course, we can disable the garbage collector. We could do some stuff that you were like, I shouldn't do this at home with my own projects. Like, this is like borderline in almost, it felt like cheating sometimes. But the point is, it shows us all the capabilities and also how, in a way, some of the solutions stayed true to the syntax and the features of the Java programming language. Like we didn't need to cheat that much.
Right. Yes. And people actually try to cheat and take advantage of everything you do or what's possible. So one of the things was, so Thomas Wörtinger, he is the lead of GraalVM at Oracle, right? And he seems nothing to have to do because he spent lots of time on his implementation of the challenge. And I mean, he also won, I should say that in the end. And he also made other people at Oracle also spend much time on the challenge. So it was very interesting to see. And by the way, I should say, one of them, person from the community, actually now got hired into the compiler team working on the GraalVM compiler because they showed their talent in the challenge. So this was really cool to see. But what I wanted to say is, Thomas figured out at some point is that unmapping the file from memory would actually take a significant amount of time, because most of the implementations at the top of Lilliput, they would memory map the file in off-heap memory. So, it's they can manage it by themselves. And again, there's this new foreign functional memory API, which people could leverage for that. And now what you realized, so the program was done. We have created the result. It has been printed on a standard out. And then the program continues to run for 500 milliseconds or so, half a second, before the process completes. And as he found out, this was because, it just takes so long to unmap that file from the memory. And now you could say, okay, that's the runtime of the program. So those 500 milliseconds, they should be part of your final result time. But then he said, and he made the case, we have printed out the result. And this is what is interesting to people. And this is, where we should stop measuring. And now, if we can find a way that we don't have to account for this time to unmap the file, how about that? And then he found a way, if we spawn up a separate process and we, move the cost and time for unmapping the file to that other process, then our first process is finished and it has shown the result. And we have taken those 500 milliseconds out of the equation. So he came up with that. And I was like, man, this feels like cheating. But, is this all right or it's not all right? But then I felt, okay, what's the spirit of that? And yes, I felt the spirit is, okay, I want to have the result. And okay, this is actually a valid solution. And actually also the Chrome browser does similar things in certain situations. So, it was one way to speed up the result. So I allowed it. So he said, yes, okay, this is legit or valid. And then, of course, other people adopted this. So again, coming back to the learn expire experience. And, this is how all this went, all the time, taking advantage of whatever they could.
I think we need to do more of this. This was, like you said, you didn't expect the response that you did when you created this. And,
right.
And I think it's just a sense of community.
Absolutely, yes.
It's, maybe 100 billion road challenge or something like that.
So people keep asking for that. So what is going to be the challenge next year? And actually one person said to me, so next year, January, I will take a week off so I can fully concentrate on my implementation of the challenge. And I was, look, man, I'm not even sure whether I want to do it again or next year or not. But by now, actually, I have decided I won't do it next year because actually I'm still recovering from doing it this year. I still have to heal. And also, frankly speaking, I don't really have the good idea. I think it should be something really new and cool, which is equally exciting to people. Not just same but different. So maybe I will do it in after 2 years, in 26, but I won't do it again next year. So that's my current thinking.
All right. Why don't we go around the table and have some final thoughts on the Java space, what people are talking about, what's down the road in the Java or Jakarta EE or stuff like that.
Well, the question is what is new right now or what will be new?
Well, I guess final thoughts on anything really in the Java space that you'd like to see or you'd like to be a participant in it or anything like that.
Okay, there are some features that I'm already using from Java 23. I like to be an early adopter, so I have seen some improvements in the performance. So I'm really excited about that. As I said, some of the features you can use new APIs and then you feel like you are programming in a modern world. But even if you are not programming in a modern world and you still want to upgrade or update your release version to Java version, to your JVM or JDK version, it's worth it. What I'm excited about the future is the next release, Java 24, because it's one of the largest. So I think even if it's not an LTS, it's going to bring a lot of attention into the whole concept of the release process and the release cadence. And that is always important because, as I said, in my mind, there is no doubt that Java, it's one of the best languages to pick. I would still pick it as my first programming language. As I said before, it's not about just learning one programming language. It's not feasible at this moment, but it's one of the most solid decisions that you can make. So that is exciting for me because we're trying to reduce the complexity for the newcomers. Even if there are seasoned developers or people already with experience in other areas or in other industries are coming to programming languages or computer science, Java, it's going to be a good opportunity for them without a lot of the issues that we had 20 plus years ago when we first adopted. Other things that I like about Java and the different versions is that we backport important things, for example, for security and things like that. And we can talk about the importance of doing that because for many, many reasons you can upgrade or not. But my encouragement to people would be do upgrade as soon as possible. Try it. Sometimes it is worth it just by the improvements in the performance that you will gain, even if you don't adopt the new syntax or the new APIs. It is still worth the try. And we always need feedback. Like the whole point of having JEPs is they are not written on stone. So if you try them and something goes against what you expected to happen, this is the time to go back and talk to the people behind them.
Gunnar, final thoughts?
So I think the overarching theme I'm really excited about is that Java becomes a viable option for many things, as I mentioned, where you may not have considered Java that much in the past. And so just coming back to this vector API, I think that's a great example because if you wanted to use those SIMD instructions like before the vector API, you actually would have to use a language like Rust or C, which is just a little bit closer to the metal. And then you were able to, specify, okay, those are the instructions like on a CPU specific level, which I would like to use. And then you could do it. But of course, like this really meant, okay, you were programming for like this specific CPU architecture or even version, like, Intel or ARM and like the specific instruction set extensions. And in Java, we didn't really have the opportunity to do that. The compiler sometimes would auto-vectorize code, take advantage of those instructions, but it wasn't something which we could consciously do. Whereas now with the vector API, we can, because this API gets compiled down into those SIMD instructions. And I feel suddenly actually we are in a better spot than maybe in other languages because, this happens automatically and transparently for us, right? So I can write vectorized code and then the JVM will make sure this gets compiled into the corresponding instructions on ARM or on Intel or whatever other CPU may support those instructions. Or it would just be like executed in a scalar way if there is no SIMD support. So I think this is like a continuing theme. Again, also like the sub-millisecond pause times. Again, something which we just couldn't do. And I think there's more stuff also coming up with like Valhalla, the compact object headers, and so on. So Java really becomes an interesting option for more and more problems where we didn't really consider it maybe before. And touching on what you said, Ixchel, this is, I think, a great point. Yes, upgrading, it's like a vital thing. And what I would recommend is, because sometimes people may have a hard time to argue why they should upgrade and, what do we gain? And you want to use those fancy APIs, but do we really should take the risk for that? And let's not do it, right? And I think the right way to argue for that is always maybe take a look at those JVM improvements, because if you can make the case, yes, we have like better tail latencies, we have better throughput, so maybe we need less CPUs, less machines to run the same workload. So this actually goes to save money. And I feel like whenever you talk like people who pay the check, in the end of the day, they like to hear those sorts of arguments, right? And so I feel like this can be a very good good avenue to talk about those things. And then by virtue of doing that, you will also get to benefit from those APIs which you desire to use. Bottom line is, I think it's a very exciting time to be a Java developer. And I don't know, personally, I cannot wait to see what's coming in 24. And then also, of course, like all the subsequent versions, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and something you touched upon, Ixchel, is talk about JDK 25 is going to be next LTS. And look at 24 with 21 JEPs and counting. I fully expect structured concurrency to be part of JDK 24. It'll be a fourth preview. So maybe, and this is just speculation on my part, maybe a lot of these preview features might be final in JDK 25, but that's just my theory. But for me, with my weekly news roundup that I do for InfoQ, I follow on the whole weekly updates on the JEPs themselves, among other things. And then, since I'm involved in Jakarta EE, I'm a committer on Jakarta Data and Jakarta NoSQL. And I also just joined as a Jakarta EE Future Directions group. We just got started off with meetings. So there's a lot going to be happening. I'd like to see some AI development, maybe whether it's in the microprofile space or in Jakarta EE. I think that might be exciting down the road. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. By the way, there is one thing I need to say, because I know my good friend Nikolai Parlok will yell at us. So he will say Java 25 is not an LTS release, because LTS just isn't a notion of OpenJDK itself. There is just like random build providers which happen to align on that version to provide LTS, but technically that's a very important difference. So I just want to say that to make Nikolai happy.
Yes, I that reminds me. I think I've heard him say that in one of his podcasts or video screencasts or whatever. But
we fight over that like all the time. Just like last week, we met in the Netherlands at JFall. We discussed over beer, because I look at it a little bit like differently. So it's like an ongoing fight between us on that topic. You should have him on the podcast, and he can give you his perspective.
He presented at the Garden State Jug just as we were starting to get back in-person meetings, but he presented remotely. So I'd love to meet him and, Adam Bean, for example.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you very much, both of you, for taking an hour out of your day, or a little bit more, especially now that it's almost 9 o'clock at night by you. But this was great. This was an absolute joy to have conversation with you on this.
Likewise.
And I hope to see you in person at an upcoming conference one of these days. And also to our InfoQ readers, if you're out at QCon San Francisco, QCon London, one of the other QCon events, please stop and say hello. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. This was fun.
Thank you.